Democratic-led states are taking the fight to the administration over Donald Trump's attempt to freeze trillions of dollars in federal grants and loans that Congress passed to send to the states. A coalition of 23 state attorneys general, led by New York's Letitia James, have sued to block the freeze. New York Attorney General Letitia James joins me now. And General James, thank you so much for being here. Tell me about this lawsuit. New York and California are leading it. It's 23 states and cities total. What are you looking to have happen?
So thank you for having me, Joy. Not only is it California, but it's Rhode Island, it's Massachusetts, it's New Jersey, it's Rhode Island, and it's the state of New York, which is leading this matter. What we are seeking, obviously, is a temporary restraining order and then a preliminary injunction against this illegal act. It is ultra-virus. It exceeds the authority of the President of the United States. It's in violation of the spending clause. So the United States Congress has control of the purse, and so this President of the United States cannot disrespect a co-equal branch of government with the stroke of a pen. And it's important that individuals understand that a number of states, their portals were frozen today. Here in the state of New York, our portal, our Medicaid portal, was closed off. There was a state in Arizona, Attorney General Mays indicated that, in fact, just last night, she had seized over 500,000 pounds of methamphetamines, and that drug program, that interdiction program, that could have been affected. Law enforcement grants, food for seniors, Meals on Wheels, Head Start, aid to farmers, aid to pregnant women, aid to children. The list goes on and on and on. It is unprecedented, unparalleled, but basically illegal, unconstitutional, reckless, and dangerous.
And, you know, it seems that that Donald Trump is testing federalism itself and attempting to seize for himself and for his administration powers, as you point out, that were in the Constitution designated to Congress, and then sort of doing the same thing in sort of launching what feels like almost an invasion of these states with ICE agents on the streets of American cities. We know that New York City joined the list of cities where these performative raids are taking place, sometimes with celebrity podcasters joining along, Dr. Phil there on hand. It's almost as if they're doing it like a reality show. What protections can the Attorney General's office offer to the people of New York in this case?
It's chaos, confusion, and it's conflict, but basically it's fear. And what it's having is a chilling effect on undocumented and immigrants here in the great state of New York. We are monitoring this situation. It is my understanding that ICE was in New York City and in parts of Westchester and in the Bronx today, but they were focusing on dangerous individuals. And obviously we support their efforts in that regard. But when it comes to individuals who could not go to school, children who could not go to school, individuals who are victims and witnesses to crime who are afraid to go into courthouses, individuals who are victims of domestic violence and cannot get orders of protection because they're afraid to go into court, individuals who cannot go see their doctors. That is what is happening. I cannot tell you, Joy, the number of individuals who've come up to me crying because they are concerned about our government, who are concerned about being deported for doing absolutely nothing. Individuals who have been in this country and who have contributed to our economy, individuals who work each and every day, who know no other country but the United States, individuals that are fleeing dangerous situations, fleeing violence in their country, who only come here because they want the same thing that you and I want, and that is to make sure that our family is safe and to contribute to these United States. And it's unfortunate that I have to hold countless number of individuals in my arms crying because we have a government right now that is reckless.
Reckless and also, I mean, as I've said, performative. I mean, I want to show you an image of Kristi Noem, who was just confirmed, the former governor who was confirmed as a Department of Homeland Security. I mean, it's as if she's cosplaying. It's almost a game where she seems to be cosplaying, as I'm not sure what she thinks that she's portraying here. She might as well be at Comic-Con looking like this. And it feels like the attempt, as you said, is to instill fear, not really to enforce the law. You can't say you're going after individuals who are just dangerous criminals if you are invading schools, because elementary and high school kids cannot be what you're talking about.
And again, in Newark, New Jersey, as you know, they also detained an American citizen who was a veteran. It is performative theater, and it's nothing more than shock and awe. But at the same time, it's, again, stoking fear in countless families across countless municipalities and across states. And individuals need to understand that immigrants and undocumented individuals contribute so much to our economy, so much to innovation and creativity, to business. And this is a nation of immigrants that President Kennedy once said. And it's important that we understand and respect them and recognize that they, too, have rights. And that's why, as the Attorney General of the great state of New York, we've issued advisories. We've held meetings with clergy. We have held meetings with advocacy groups and with business leaders, again, who are concerned about the attacks on our democracy, attack on the rule of law, and attacks against citizens who want nothing more than to live in peace and to contribute to the economy of the United States of America.
The irony, of course, for Donald Trump in particular, is that the state of New York is the state that made him a felon because he was duly convicted by a jury of his peers in the hush money case. But there were two civil judgments that in cases that your office brought, Madam Attorney General, that includes the fraud case in which Donald Trump was found to have serially defrauded the state of New York. He still owes the state of New York some $500 million. And then, of course, there was the civil case that E. Jean Carroll brought for defamation and for sexual abuse, in which he was also convicted by a jury of his peers, found liable for sexual abuse, in which he owes E. Jean Carroll. He is now attempting to claim, as somebody who's supposedly about law and order, that the law and order that was dispensed by New York juries do not apply to him, and stating that his immunity that the Supreme Court gave him extends to the E. Jean Carroll case, and presumably that he doesn't have to pay the state of New York. Can the state of New York force him to live under the law?
So again, in my case, we are waiting for a decision from the appellate division in the Second Circuit. And it's important to understand that all of the violations of law that he engaged in, including trying to take advantage of our insurance laws, our tax laws, and not paying adequately to our tax base, were done when he was not the president of the United States. And this is a civil matter. It is not criminal. And so the pardon law does not apply in this particular case. And so we are awaiting a decision. And upon that decision, we suspect that he will probably appeal that decision to the highest court in the state of New York, the Court of Appeals. But we are confident at the end of the day that he will be held accountable to the residents and to the taxpayers of the great state of New York, because only one rule should apply, and should apply to all of us equally, regardless of whether or not you sit in the highest office of these United States.
New York Attorney General Letitia James, thank you very much.